Hello everyone, and welcome to this Society of Dairy Technology webinar based on dairy science and technology papers that have been recently published in our journal, the International Journal of Dairy Technology. The webinar is in two parts, with the second part following on from our annual general meeting, which will take place a week ahead on the 24th of November at 11 AM. My name is Michael Mullen. I am the Editor-in-Chief of the International Journal of Dairy Technology, and I will be chairing this session. There will be three presentations. Feel free to make comments and ask questions throughout the session using the question and answer function on Zoom. This is located at the bottom of your screen, and you can either activate it using your mouse or fingers if you've got touch screen. There are scheduled question and answer sessions after each presentation, which I will ask our speakers, where I will ask our speakers as many of these questions as possible. You will appreciate that we have very limited time, and I will probably not be able to ask all your questions. However, we will try to publish the answers to as many questions as possible on the SDT website after the event. At the end of the webinar, we would be grateful if you would complete a short questionnaire to provide feedback on how you found the event. The presentations are being recorded and will be uploaded to the SDT website and the SDT YouTube channel after the session. Our first speaker is Dr. Daniel Schwarz from Foss. Daniel grew up on a dairy farm in Germany and had an interest in dairying and milk production since his early childhood. He graduated in animal sciences and completed a PhD in the field of bovine mastitis at George August University, Göttingen in Germany. Daniel has been working as a senior scientist with Foss for the last 9 years. Foss is a provider of analytical solutions for the food and agriculture industry. Daniel is looking into new solutions and parameters for milk analysis that allow for optimizing both production and milk quality. In this context, Daniel works with customers to support initial pilot testing through to the launch and broad implementation of new services. So at this point, I'm delighted to hand over to Daniel, whose presentation is entitled Development of Global Fatty Acid Models and Possible Applications. Daniel.
Well, thank you again for the kind introduction, Michael, and thank you for the opportunity to present here today. This is some work that I carried out together with my colleagues Marie Rosenberg-Bach and Per Woben-Hansen. And before I focus on the actual work, I will give a brief introduction to the company Foss. There it goes. The company is a family-owned business founded 66 years ago, and it all started in the field of grain analysis. And then already in the 60s, the company started offering some solutions for milk analysis. And over the years, more and more technology was integrated in the company, always the latest technology available on the market, and different solutions to fix certain challenges in the food supply chain were introduced. The challenge that we are all facing today is that we have a continuously growing world population and an increasing demand for food, in particular food of high quality. So the mission of the company Foss is to provide the food production sector with analytical solutions to help optimizing the food production as much as possible, reduce waste, and really get most out of the limited resources that we have available on our planet. We have a global presence. The dark blue marked countries are covered through our own sales and service subsidiaries. In the light blue countries, we would operate with some distributors. And the orange dots, well, the orange dot in the northern part of Europe, that is our headquarter location where I am speaking from today, north of Copenhagen. And then we have sites in Hungary and China as well. I already indicated that we are working in the field of milk analysis. Here we are present in raw milk testing as such, and then milk processing, grain and oilseed. I indicated that as well. And then other segments where we are working in are wine and beer, meat, feed and forage, other industries such as plant-based, and laboratories where we do have solutions for reference analysis, for example, protein. Zooming in on milk analysis, here we are trying to add more and more parameters. So laboratories that receive milk samples can extract as much as possible information from these samples and then provide that back to the dairy industry so the industry can optimize. And as for today, the focus is on fatty acid profiling. Here we launched solutions in the early 2010s and then in 2019. And the objective of the study that I will be presenting here today were twofold. First of all, we wanted to describe how we developed the models available for our instruments and how they are performing. And secondly, we also wanted to show what can be done in the industry using such fatty acid data. First of all, what are fatty acids? Milk fat as such consists of many triglycerides, and I brought a schematic image of a triglyceride. To the left of the dashed line, we have something called glycerol or backbone that holds together 3 fatty acids. It is always 3 fatty acids. And in this example here, we have C16-0, which is just a carbon chain without any double bonds. Then we have C18-1, which means 18 carbons and 1 double bond, which is indicated here by these 2 lines. And then C18-3, where we have actually 3 double bonds. Again, the chains as such are just carbon chains. Then we were using FTIR technology. FTIR is the abbreviation for Fourier transform infrared. And it is used in one of these analyzers here called Milkoscan 7RM. What exactly happens is that we have an interferometer here, and in this interferometer we have an energy source that emits energy on the sample stream. The milk sample would pass the energy source here in a very thin stream, and then all the molecules in the sample, they are activated by the energy source. They start swinging, and we are measuring how they are swinging. This would look as follows. So here we have a random spectra from a milk sample, and we have different wave numbers because these molecules they swing differently. And on the y-axis, we have the intensity, how many signals we get at different wave numbers. In terms of the fatty acids, what we can see from these molecular structures that I showed before are the CH chains to the very right, then the CO stretch here, the orange one, the CH band, the double bonds basically, and the CO stretches. These different structures appear in the spectra as such. And what we can do then is we can predict the chain length and the degree of unsaturation. More about that in a moment. One very important consideration when working with milk fat and fatty acids is that there is a natural correlation between these two. the more fat I have in a milk sample, the higher the concentration of certain fatty acids if I work with them in the, using the unit milk basis. To further illustrate that, here a table where we can see that the milk basis numbers actually change as fat content increases. But if we correct these numbers for the actual fat content in the sample, we will see that it's the same concentration of these of C14 in all these 4 samples. So and given that there is this natural correlation, we used a workaround, which was to convert the milk basis results to fat basis results according to some IDF guidelines, and then looked at the true composition of the fatty acids in the milk sample, corrected for the fat. So in terms of model development, we already had a data set available from Europe, and we expanded that data set by collecting samples in North America, 3 different sites in the US, and 2 sites in Canada, and then 1 additional site in Japan. We collected different types of samples, bulk tank samples, meaning all the milk from 1 farm together, and then DHI samples or individual cow milk samples. We covered different breeds. We covered different feeding regimes in our sample selection, and we covered different seasons. And we tried to cover all these things in order to cover as much variation as possible, and thus be able to develop models that are as robust as possible towards such variation. Then we analyzed all the samples using FTIR technology, either a Milkoscan FT Plus or a Milkoscan 7 RM. And we performed gas chromatography analysis to get the detailed fatty acid profiles. And here we followed different IDF standards. The next step was then to basically put all the data together and associate the milk spectra with the reference values. And then we use a statistical program and a procedure called PLS, partial least square, to develop the methods. We ended up developing 14 different models, and they are listed here. We can distinguish fatty acids depending on the chain length, which where we ended up having short chain, medium, and long chain fatty acids. As you will see, we grouped certain fatty acids for these according to their length here. Then we distinguish the fatty acids depending on the degree of unsaturation. Here we have saturated fatty acids, no double bonds, and unsaturated fatty acids with either only one, which would be the mono unsaturated fatty acids double bond, or several double bonds. Trans fatty acids, and then major fatty acids and fatty acids according to their origin in the cow. The performance of the models, they correlate very well with the reference method being GC, as I said, and we specified different performance parameters: accuracy, repeatability, correlation coefficient, and the relative percent difference. You will find ranges down here because we worked with different reference laboratories and calculated the statistics depending on the reference laboratory. How does fatty acid profiling work in practice? We have milk samples available in the milk testing laboratories, as mentioned. They are using our equipment. They are running thousands of samples per day, and it only takes 6 seconds to actually analyze one sample. And then we can use the data twofold. One would be we look at bulk tank milk samples and look at some functional properties of the milk, and then we could, for example, produce dairy products with enhanced nutritional value. I will explain a little more in a bit. A second application could be to optimize the feeding of dairy cows, and I will explain that example in more detail as well. So in terms of the enhanced nutritional value, if you want, if we just take some real-life data and look at the distribution of saturated and polyunsaturated fatty acids, we will find that we have quite a distribution actually. And given that our bodies cannot produce unsaturated fatty acids themselves, we are dependent on getting them through our nutrition. If we now have milk with elevated concentrations of these polyunsaturated fatty acids, like illustrated with the orange box here, we actually have milk with enhanced nutritional value. And there are several studies available that show that such milk leads to lower risk for cardiovascular disease, for example. We can also think about using the data for milk processing. Here, we want to describe the characteristics of the milk fat, and one thought here is that we have milk that is more suitable for just fresh milk production versus milk that is more suitable for cheese production, and then optimize the yields for both of these products. Very briefly, 1 year ago, there was the Buttergate, big Buttergate discussion in Canada. And here consumers of dairy products had observed that the butter as such changed. And then there was a task force put together that could prove, based on the fatty acid profiles, that there were no evident changes over the past 3 years. So they could use facts to basically end this whole discussion. In terms of dairy cow nutrition, here the interesting application is to monitor the fatty acid profile development over time. And then we can find some interesting situations as here, where we see the de novo fatty acids going down, preformed fatty acids going up. And just in a nutshell, what it means is that we have a situation where the cows cannot get enough energy out of the feed and thus need to compensate with their body by mobilizing their body fat. As they can't do this forever, they would start to reduce the milk fat at some stage, and then it has some negative financial implications on the income of the farm. Last but not least, an application that we are working on at the moment is to use the fatty acid profile to monitor methane emissions. And this is essentially possible because processes in the rumen of the cow, where the methane, most of the methane originates from, correlate very well with what fatty acids we can find in the milk. To briefly summarize my presentation here, it is possible to reliably, accurately, fast, and in a cost-efficient way determine milk fatty acid profiles using FTIR technology. Existing applications of working with fatty acid profiles are to produce dairy products with enhanced nutritional properties and to optimize the feeding of the cows. And then applications that are under development at the moment would be to optimize yields during milk processing and to monitor methane emissions of the cows. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Daniel, for your presentation. Unfortunately, this is a really short session, and I'm going to have to go on to our next session. But if we have any time at the end, we will come back to you with questions. I really appreciate that you've spoken to us. I'm just sorry there isn't more time, but you did have the opportunity to talk a little about the potential applications of your research. And I hope that those people who are watching will perhaps take some of those suggestions up with you and your company. So Daniel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this point, we're moving on to our second speaker, Dr. Bernadette O'Brien. Dr. O'Brien is a principal research scientist at Chuggas Animal and Grassland Research and Innovation Centre, Moor Park in County Cork, in Ireland, of course. In her current role at Chuggas, much of Bernadette O'Brien's work focuses on residues in milk. This work is of particular importance in meeting the demands for premium dairy products in new and existing markets internationally. For perhaps those of you who are not maybe familiar with Ireland, Ireland is a major exporter of dairy products, and there's very significant research and work going on at Chuggas and at UCC in relation to dairy products. And Dr. O'Brien is a leader in a lot of that research. Dr. O'Brien is also a member of the IDF working group on residues and chemical contaminants in milk. Bernadette's other projects are associated with automatic milking, precision grazing management, labour efficiency, and exploring new technology on dairy farms. Bernadette has been very successful in securing significant EU and national research funding and has published widely. We will now listen to Dr. O'Brien's presentation entitled Effective Chlorine-Free Cleaning on Milking Equipment on the Microbiological Quality and Chlorine-Related Residues in Bulk Tank Milk. Bernadette, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And today I would like to speak to you about the effect of chlorine-free cleaning of milking equipment on the microbiological quality and chlorine-related residues in bulk tank milk. And in this presentation, I would also like to acknowledge my co-authors there, David Gleeson, Lysandra Paludetti, and Tom Beresford as well. So in introduction then, as you said, Chairman, Ireland exports a lot of its milk in the form of dairy products. In fact, it exports 90% of the milk produced in the form of dairy products, and that represents 25% of all food exports from Ireland. But we do need to focus on milk quality to ensure the production of healthy products and that we meet the requirements of the international markets and regulatory agencies. First of all, we need to meet, when we're exporting into a country, we need to meet the legislative standards of that country that's importing our product. And secondly, then we need to meet the specific standards of the purchasing group as well, the group that are purchasing our product. The higher value products, I suppose, that we export from here would mainly include the infant milk formula, Kerrygold butter, and cheddar cheese. But the main point here, I suppose, is that we need to start with milk of the highest quality. That is the raw milk as sold off the farm, because if it's not correct at that stage, there is only a very limited degree of correction that can take place afterwards. So here in this presentation, we're focusing on the chemical and microbiological quality. And we're focusing specifically on chlorine residues. Now, there are two residues that are involved here. One is trichloromethane, TCM, and the other one is chlorate. We have been working on both of these for a while now. The trichloromethane has been focused on with a number of years, and the chlorate is a more recent one. Both of them are critically important residues because they're both health related. The TCM occurs in butter and is considered to be carcinogenic or have a carcinogenic issues, whereas on the other hand, the chlorate is associated with the inhibition of iodine uptake with infants and children being a particularly vulnerable group. And there is particular concern when milk powder then is being used as an ingredient to the infant milk formula industry. So the TCM and chlorate residues arise mainly from the use of chlorine-based detergents for cleaning of milking equipment. And that is, generally speaking, we're talking about the milking machine and the bulk tank on the farm. Now, some residues can occur from the chlorine, can occur as well in the processing plant, but largely now, because of the issues with TCM and chlorate, the chlorine has been removed with some time from the processing plants. Now, the standards, or the targets, I should say, the targets are increasing all the time, and they are becoming more stringent. The target for TCM now is 0.00124 milligrams per kg of milk and 0.024 milligrams per kg in butter. The reason why it is higher in butter is that the TCM is associated with the fat, and obviously the fat is higher in the cream. It multiplies up, so therefore in order to achieve the 0.024 in butter, we need 0.00124 milligrams per kg in the milk. Then alternatively with the chlorate, the target there is less than 0.01 milligrams per kg, and that's the required level, or the required target in the final product. That is, for example, the infant or follow-on formula. And again, in order to have, because there's a concentration effect when the milk powder is concentrated or dried, the milk is dried, the level in the milk has to be much lower again. So because of the importance of our export market, and because of the occurrence of the TCM and chlorate residues, we had to go with a chlorine-free strategy. So the removal of all chlorine-based cleaning products is now the strategy in Ireland, and that is the case since January of 2021. But there is little knowledge on the impact of replacing the chlorine-based products with the chlorine-free products on the microbiological quality of bulk tank milk. This has been tested in a research environment, but it is now necessary to test it on commercial farms as well. Also, we do have in Ireland a seasonal milk production system, and therefore that sometimes can be more challenging from a microbiological point of view. And that type of system is where all of the cows calve in the springtime, and then all of the cows are dried off in the autumn time. So we don't have I suppose, an even supply of milk throughout the year, and therefore because of the low volume at the end of the year and at the beginning of the year, weather can also be or have deteriorated at those times of the year, and microbiology can be a challenge sometimes. So therefore, in that case, we have to have an extended duration of any study like this as well. So the objective in this case, in this study, it was to measure the impact of chlorine-free cleaning protocols on the microbiological quality and chlorine-related residues in bulk tank milk when used on commercial dairy farms across the production season. Now, the materials and methods for this, the chlorine-based cleaning protocols involved a combination of sodium hydroxide and sodium hypochlorite, and also acid descale products. On the other hand, the chlorine-free cleaning involves sodium hydroxide as the main cleaning agent, with acid-based products as well. We had 59 spring calving herds then. The selection of those farms was based on the cleaning protocol used. We wanted to use the protocol that the farms were already using, so they would be used to it. Secondly, the willingness to take part in the study, the location of the farm, and the fact that they had a spring calving herd. So we had 3 groups. In the first group, we had 13 farms using chlorine-based products for the milking machine and the bulk tank. In the second group, we had 28 farms using chlorine-free products for the milking machine and the bulk tank. And finally, we had 10 farms using chlorine-free products for the bulk tank cleaning only. And these people continued to use the chlorine-based products for the milking machine cleaning. In terms of microbiological analysis, the milk sampling dates occurred on the 24th of April, 26th of August, and the 13th of November. So milk samples were collected on those specific mornings directly from the bulk tanks by milk quality advisors. And samples were then held in cooler boxes until they were delivered in the laboratory at Moore Park. And then microbiological analysis commenced within 12 hours. All milks were tested in duplicate. Total bacterial counts, psychotrophic, thermoduric, and thermophilic counts were done. Bacillus cereus counts and enterococci in milk samples were also tested. And bacterial counts were measured using the Petrifilm aerobic count plates. We also did a questionnaire survey, and this was done at each sample collection at the farm to confirm that the cleaning protocols remained as they were defined at the start of the experiment. And also we wanted to capture information on the size of the milking plants, for example, the type of cleaning products used on the farm, the specific makes of the products, and the frequency of hot water use. And that is extremely important, because if the chlorine is taken out of the system, something else has to, have an effect on the microbiological quality. So the quantification of the trichloromethane then was by static headspace gas chromatography with electron capture detector and fitted with a low thermal mass system, and that's an Agilent system. The quantification of chlorate then was done by high performance liquid chromatography coupled with tandem mass spec and with electrospray ionization. Now for the results, along the left side column there, you can see total bacterial counts, psychotrophic, thermophile, thermoduric, enterococci, and bacillus cereus. Then we have the three treatments here: the chlorine-based products, chlorine-free products, and chlorine-free in the bulk tank. We have the significance here in terms of the treatment and also the test days. So we can see that the total bacterial counts, the psychotrophic counts, and the thermophile counts were all lowest for the chlorine-free cleaning. They were significantly lower compared to the chlorine-based cleaning products, and with the chlorine-free bulk tank cleaning then intermediate. There was a tendency for the bacillus cereus also to be lower with the chlorine-free product as opposed to the chlorine-based product, and there was no the results for the thermoduric and the enterococci bacteria were similar across treatments. Then when we look at the change over the period of the trial, then we're talking about some increase in a significant increase in the in all of the micro types between the beginning of the year and the end of the year. But again, we would have expected that. But there was no difference between the chlorine-free or the chlorine-based products in that respect. They all increased as the season went on. Here we see the TCM levels in the bulk tanks from the farms using the chlorine-based, chlorine-free, and bulk tank chlorine-free products. And we can see here that the TCM levels for the chlorine-free is significantly lower than the chlorine-based, with the chlorine-free in the bulk tank intermediate. Now that would be as we would expect. Also with the test day here, we're looking at the date in April, in August, and in November for the full duration of the trial, and we see that the TCM levels were higher here, significantly higher in November than they were in August. They were similar to April, but they were considerably higher in August, while still well within our target, obviously. And in this slide, we're showing the average chlorate levels in the milk samples. Here we have the chlorine-based, chlorine-free, and chlorine-free in the bulk tank. This is the average milligrams per kg, the average level of chlorate. And that was much lower. The level of chlorate was significantly lower in the chlorine-free cleaning compared with the chlorine-based cleaning. And again, the chlorine-free in the bulk tank was intermediate. When we look at the percentage of samples where chlorate was detected, we see a very significant increase in the level of or the percentage of samples where chlorine was detected with the chlorine-based products. And again, we would expect that. The percentage of milk samples then with chlorate across the season, and that was significantly higher in November compared to the other two times. So just to summarize the results then, first of all, the total bacterial counts, psychotrophic and thermophilic counts were significantly lower with chlorine-free than with chlorine-based products. The bacillus cereus also tended to be lower for the chlorine-free products. There were no differences between all three cleaning protocols for thermoduric or enterococci bacteria. The higher TCM levels were observed with chlorine-based compared to chlorine-free protocols. The TCM tended to be higher in November. The percentage of milk samples with chlorate detected was highest with chlorine-based compared to chlorine-free products, and the highest percentage of samples with chlorate detected was observed in November. So then in discussion, the farms using chlorine-free protocols had better microbiological quality than the farms using the chlorine-based cleaning. And these farms, we suspect that the reason for that is that these farms had specific guidance from the milk quality advisors, whereas the others did not. No specific negative impact observed on the prolonged use of chlorine-free products, but the milking equipment was not inspected for visual cleanliness, which should be done in future trials. Chlorine-free cleaning requires a lot of changes on farms, including the increase in the number of hot washes per week and increased use of peracetic acid and descalers. But all farms do not do this. In the questionnaire that we did, we found that chlorine-free protocols, we found that only 34% of farms used more than 1 descale wash per week, for example, when in fact there should be between 2 and 7. Water temperatures used were less than 70 degrees when they should be about 75 or 80, and rinse levels were about 14 litres per unit instead of, there were 12.5 instead of 14 litres per unit. So if all of those things were done, the results would probably be better again. So we would say that specific guidance from milk quality advisors is extremely important in the changeover to chlorine-free products. There was an increase in chlorate levels in late lactation, and that may be due to lower milk volumes, so the seed was more concentrated. And also, people may have purchased the products at the start of the season in the springtime, and those products would have been left stored over the summertime, and it is during that storage time that the chlorate develops in those products. Some milk samples from the farms using chlorine-free products had detected levels of TCM as well, and that may be due to, by right they shouldn't have, but that may have been due to a number of things. First of all, a contribution from chlorinated water supplies, where farms were getting water from municipal supplies. Secondly, it could be due to the farmer using chlorine dioxide-based teat disinfectants. Or finally, a low level of chlorate formed. There is sometimes a low level of chlorate formed in chlorine-free products, in sodium hydroxide, for example, or caustic products, because the pharmaceutical grade product would not be used on farms, and there can be a small amount of chlorine there. So even though detected, these levels were much lower than those observed on chlorine-based farms. So in conclusion, then, chlorine-free cleaning protocols using chlorine-free detergent products do not lead to hygiene problems over an 8-month period if used correctly. They result in lower average TCM levels in milk, and they result in lower average chlorate levels in milk. But close guidance is required from the milk quality advisor to the farmer in those cases. But this is a good result, and I think it gives confidence to our industry in the chlorine-free approach and in achieving future microbiological and chlorine-related residue targets in our dairy products. Thank you.
Bernadette, thank you very much. A really interesting and important presentation as far as industry and those companies that are exporting dairy products is concerned. Bernadette, would you mind if we brought the question and answer session to the end? And we try and do that as use the time as economically as possible. Could I just remind everybody that you can submit questions using the Q&A function, which we've discussed before. So at this point, we'll move on to our next speaker, Dr. Fatma Ali. Fatma is from Tianjin University of Science and Technology in China. So we're delighted to have you so far away in China.
Yeah.
Dr. Fatma Ali received her PhD from Tianjin University in Science and Technology. She's based at the Department of Biological Chemical Engineering at the College of Chemical Engineering and Materials Sciences at the university. Dr. Ali has published numerous papers in food engineering. She collaborates with food science and technology researchers on a regular basis. She's a number of areas of interest in dairy technology. She's particularly interested in non-thermal techniques, milk proteins, plant-based food, and food chemistry. At this point, I'm delighted to hand over to Fatma, who will give her presentation on how non-thermal and thermal treatments impact the structure and microstructure of the milk fat globule membrane. Fatma, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael, for this introduction. Today, I'm going to talk about the effect of non-thermal technique on the structure and microstructure of milk fat globule membrane. Actually, there is an increasing interest in the potential use of milk fat globule membrane as an ingredient in food and non-food application due to the functional properties of the polar lipids and proteins presented in MFGM. And MFGM has numerous health promoting effects, and some studies have reported a significant relation between MFGM fractions and individual components with some disease. So before starting talking about the effect of cold plasma on MFGM, let me give you a brief introduction on MFGM. MFGM consists of a complex system of organelles such as protein, enzymes, and lipids. Different sizes from milky fat are gathering in droplets shaped during the secretion stage itself and consist of triglycerides. These droplets called milky fat globules, which consisting of total lipids. It is a source of multiple bioactive compounds, including phospholipids, glycolipids, glycoproteins, and carbohydrates that have important functional roles within the brain and gut. Besides, MFGM protects the globules from coalescence and enzymatic degradation and acts as natural emulsifier. Several health-promoting effects have been attributed to MFGM material, for instance, polar lipids. Polar lipids are natural emulsifiers widely used in food formulation, mainly from vegetal sources, and milky fat globules naturally contain polar lipids rich in sphingomyelin, which was shown in preclinical studies to reduce intestinal cholesterol absorption and improve lipid metabolism because of the natural affinity of sphingomyelin to form complexes with cholesterol. And some available clinical studies on dietary supplementation with milk polar lipids were rather inconclusive regarding their beneficial impact on human lipid metabolism. Whereas egg polar lipids or fat devoid of polar lipids were reported to increase lipid markers of cardiovascular risk in these studies. So these entire findings pose the idea that milk polar lipid supplementation has a beneficial effect on neural function throughout life. Then what is the problem? The problem is fresh milk should be thermally processed prior to consumption for eliminating the pathogenic bacteria. However, thermal processing enhances microbiological safety. Heating may disrupt hydrophobic and hydrogen bonds during milk processing. Furthermore, the proteins from the skim milk were absorbed into the fat globule surface when the milky fat globules were disrupted. So it's the time to find alternative techniques for thermal treatment. Non-thermal processing have attracted much attention in the last decade for producing milk products with dependable quality and properties for consumers and industry. So cold atmospheric pressure plasma is partially or completely ionized and composed of charged particles, free electrons, free radicals, and intermediate highly reactive species. The ions in cold plasma only receive a little energy and are maintained at a low temperature, which makes cold plasma convenient for treating heat-sensitive substances like MFGM. Cold plasma has huge effect of all the kind of foods like fruit, vegetables, meats, and the related products, grain and cereals. And what I care about is dairy products. Cold plasma can change free fatty acid structure, increase total aldehyde modify proteins structure, improve functional properties, decrease foaming and emulsifying properties, and increase foam stability. Before explaining the method used in this paper, let me show you quickly the basic method of MFGM isolation, which using in all paper or most of the papers. Raw cream is using to isolate MFGM. The separation process is completing at 55 degrees. Then the cream is immediately cooled to 4 degrees. Then the raw cream is diluting to remove the globules residuing in the cream phase and milk proteins. The fat content is redispersing in stimulated milk ultrafiltrate and then washing, then cream churning stage, and then the washing step in this stage is repeating twice, sometimes 3 times. It depends on many parameters like the kind of milk and the quality of experiments and other parameters. Then the cream centrifuge to remove all the residual fat. And finally, all MFGM component in the supernatant is collecting and stored at -20 degrees. In this study, a DBD50 plasma reactor was used in this study to sterilize the cream, which was divided into 6 portions: control sample, pasteurized sample, and 4 cold plasma treated samples. The pasteurized samples was heated at 68 degrees for 30 minutes and was labeled as pasteurized sample. Dielectric barrier discharge was used in the cold plasma generation mode, and the cold plasma formed between 2 quartz-covered planned parallel electrodes. During this process, the cream samples were placed on the lower quartz layer and subjected to cold plasma at 100 intensity. The treatment was performed at 100 volt and 1.5 ampere for 10, 20, 30, and 40 minutes. A volume of 5 milli cream sample was pipetted to a polystyrene petri dish with 5 mm inner diameter. Throughout the treatment, the temperature inside the reactor was monitored using an infrared thermometer and didn't exceed 55 degrees. The samples were in a liquid state and dishes were stable during the treatment. So the plates were moved manually to ensure the efficient reaction. So now I will start to display the results. The influence of cold plasma treatment on the fatty acid composition is given in this table. Palmitic acid, stearic acid, and oleic acid were the main fatty acids detected in this study. Saturated fatty acids concentration of the pasteurized sample was lower than that of plasma-treated MFGM samples compared with previously reported saturated fatty acid. Cold plasma application significantly influenced the stearic acid content in MFGM, which decreased after 20 minutes of application. And the highest reduction was not after treatment for 40 minutes. The alterations in fatty acids might be ascribed to the hydrogenation of stearic acid due to the oxygen radicals produced during plasma treatment. Then linoleic acid concentration in MFGM decreased with increasing the cold plasma treatment. This decrease was insignificant within plasma-treated samples, which could not be attributed to the dissociation reactions to form free radicals, reactive species, and unstable compounds after plasma treatment. So principally, there was a positive correlation between treatment time period and fatty acid breakdown. MFGM and non-MFGM protein yield after treatment with cold plasma is displayed in in this table. The high protein recovery from the control sample suggested milk protein MFGM reaction open isolation process, such as churning and centrifugation. The protein recovery from plasma-treated samples increased slightly with increasing the incubation period, but increased significantly after 40 minutes. The high percentage of whey proteins in the pasteurized sample is almost likely due to the interaction of whey proteins with MFGM open heating. So in particular, due to the disulfide bonding with beta-lactoglobulin. In this case, increasing plasma treatment time period might impact the small milk fat globules and induce this service to be covered with casein micelles or MFGM itself for stabilization of the service area. So estimating protein yields might provide an overview of the proportions of free stabilized proteins, but cannot determine whether casein fat or casein precipitated on MFGM fragment service, which need further investigation in my next work. So the next data, MFGM size distribution didn't change significantly among pasteurized sample and MFGM treated with cold plasma, but distinct changes could be observed in control sample and the lowest time, indicating that plasma treated with for 10 minutes almost destroyed some milk fat globules and gained slightly less globules and fat content than the control sample. This supported the fat content outcome in the previous table. The T-parts level was measured in this study to detect lipid oxidation after cold plasma application. The levels in the samples treated with cold plasma for 10 minutes and the control samples was similar. However, the levels in the samples treated with cold plasma for 20, 30, and 40 minutes was significantly higher than that in the pasteurized sample. Briefly, increasing the treatment period increased the values in plasma-treated MFGM samples. So we assume that the exposure to this voltage for a long time increased peroxide levels, which are formed as intermediate products of lipid oxidation. So less incubation period, let's say 10 minutes, was not enough to form peroxide. The microstructure was investigated to demonstrate the visible and accurate effect of DBD plasma on MFGM. With increasing the incubation period 10, 20, and 30, the MFGM service was broken to form limited globules. In turn, cold plasma treated for 40 minutes unavoidably damaged MFGM granule surfaces. So the micrograph of the control sample displayed the smallest and most homogenized granules. Moreover, granule sizes varied and some coalescence and aggregations were formed in the pasteurized sample. So the conclusion of this study is that the use of cold plasma treatment is still relatively quite new and for processing and would be potentially used as alternative thermally treatment. And however, this present study tried to display cold plasma impact on MFGM properties and showed its positive and negative effects. This relevant techniques needs more investigation to clarify its mechanism and determine the optimal conditions for its application. Thank you so much for your attention.
Okay. Fatma, thank you very much for your presentation. If you're okay, we'll maybe start the question and answer session with yourself. It'll be quite brief, and then we'll go to Daniel and then to Bernadette. So
yes, please.
Fatma, if I could just ask maybe just one question. You talked about the generation of free radicals by the plasma process. Are there any health significance to people ingesting food with lots of free radicals in them?
Listen, doctor, actually this is how to say, it's a point most of the researchers are working on it right now, because there is no clear information about this point regarding to cold plasma. That's why I said in my last slides that this need more investigation, because the accurate mechanism, we don't know about it, and we don't know about the limit of free radicals which produced from cold plasma. So we need research need to know the exact mechanism of cold plasma.
Okay, Fatma, thank you very much. I'll move at this point to Daniel. Daniel, we've got a question to do with the approximate molecular weight of the different fatty acid chains that you can get in milk. So what's the approximate molecular weight of the short, medium, and long chains in milk?
It's a really good question, and I'm afraid that I don't know by heart. So I would need to double check with my colleagues, and we would be happy to get back.
Okay. Daniel, one last question. Are you aware of any of the companies that work with Foss that are employing your model to improve functional properties of any dairy product, or is that still some distance off?
This is indeed an existing application, and as far as I know, it is part of the daily work carried out at national milk laboratories in the UK. And my understanding is that Müller UK is actually using the data to produce certain products with enhanced nutritional value.
Okay. Daniel, thank you very much. Another question has just come in for Fatma.
Yes, doctor.
Okay, Fatma, the person has thanked you very much for sharing your research, and they've asked, have you looked at the bioactivity of the protein after?
Actually, we are doing this experiment right now.
Okay.
So I can share with him the results after we finish if he needs.
Okay. Okay, we will try and flag that up after the event. So
Yes.
finally, on to Bernadette. Bernadette, there's a few comments to do with the relatively low thermogenic counts that you noticed during your work. Is that typical of thermogenic counts in milk generally in Ireland, or is it associated with just the farms that you're working with? The counts were relatively low.
I suppose both factors really. We would have, I mean, the farms that we were dealing with would have been relatively good, at their milk producing protocols and that. So there would have been a good cohort of people. Secondly, I suppose there a lot. We would recognise the thermogenic bacteria as being very important, and we would always be giving advice on trying to reduce them. And a lot of our processors, or milk purchasers, I should say, they would apply, or they do apply, a penalty or a bonus. Depending on the thermogenic levels in milk. So the farmers, the milk producers here would be very much aware of the thermogenic counts in most of the country. And therefore they would be, they would be aware of, and we would always be interacting with them about good washing protocols, to keep thermogenic bacteria down.
Okay, thank you, Bernadette. One last question. And you've actually touched on this, but it's an opportunity maybe to say a little bit more about it. Have you considered background chlorates in rinse water? This is really mains rinse water.
Correct. Yes, yes, we have. I mean, we are aware of the potential contribution of that type of water, of chlorinated water, to the issue that we're talking about, and. We have worked, I suppose we considered in the earlier stages, we considered that we would work on the factors that would maybe, have a bigger contribution, like the chlorine products, or the chlorine-based detergents. But we are now working on the water as well. And I mean, for example, the one big thing that has been done here in relation to the processing plants is that they have gone from using chlorinated water, or treating it with sodium hypochlorite and the normal way. They're using now chlorine gas. So that's a big thing in that way. And then on the farm scenario, we are also addressing it where we have looked in the laboratory at the level of chlorine in the water, or chlorates in the water, that are likely to cause a problem that would transfer to milk. And then we have made up very large volumes of water with chlorate levels to that extent and used it to wash the machine, and then the milking machine I'm talking about, and then measuring the chlorate in the milk at each line of cows that are milked after that. And what we have found is that really there is no chlorate due to that in the milk from anything after this first row of cows that are milked. There would be in that line. So the amount, or the contribution there is quite low, but we are monitoring it and we are engaging with the national body, Irish Water, and also other schemes or group schemes that would be treating water as well.
Okay, Bernadette, thank you. That brings this session to an end. I want to thank Dr. Daniel Schwarz, Dr. Bernadette O'Brien, and Dr. Fatma Ali for your presentations on your research that not only adds to our knowledge of dairy science and technology, but also this research also has the potential for application in the wider dairy industry. And I want to thank everybody who participated in the webinar for attending the session today and for your questions. Now, the Society would be grateful if you could please fill in our short feedback survey. We welcome new members, so please check our membership benefits page on the SDT website. Thanks again to Daniel, Bernadette, and Fatima, and everyone for attending today. We hope to see you at next week's AGM, and there will be a presentation from Michael Rettmeyer on compositional analysis of dairy side streams and assessment of their application as diafiltration media. The session will now end, and thank you everybody for your contributions.